Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you.
Oh, don't you know it's the Bill Arnold Show? It's Bill.
And a warm welcome to the Bill Arnold Show. You know, God made us as image bearers of Him and made us in the most spectacular way. But what might technology be doing to undermine the uniqueness that we are and the human exceptionalism that God has granted us? We're going to talk today about that very topic with Dr. Doug Groothuis. He's a distinguished university research professor of apologetics and Christian worldview at Cornerstone University and Seminary. He's written over 20 books. He, in a very soft moment, agreed to come on the show 100 times, and he's probably at interview about 89 to go. So, Doug, welcome back.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Bill.
Yeah, I love this topic. I find, technology is we create it, and then it turns around and recreates us. I'm not sure that's a good idea.
Well, they say that technology can make a good servant, but a terrible master. It can become an idol very easily. And what I see is that technologies can actually dehumanize the very humans that invented them, which is a sad irony in a fallen world. So I've been reflecting on this a little bit online. I haven't really written a tremendous amount about it, but I did a Facebook post, or it might have been a blog post also, on this idea of the vanishing human, how technology is undermining human uniqueness and human exceptionalism. And I listed a number of ways that I see this as happening. Maybe we could just start to go through those. I don't know if you have any particular order you'd like to go in or what you'd like to start with.
Well, I appreciate the way you have organized your thoughts, and I would love to proceed through them because all of them are super interesting. And if you're good with going in order, let's start with number one.
Yeah, the first one is really the philosophical bedrock, and that's where I say that there are philosophies that claim that human beings are not divinely designed and do not live in a God-haunted world. We are merely material and have evolved for no reason.
Wow.
So that's not the belief of most Americans. Most Americans believe in some kind of a God or a higher power. I don't know what the percentage of atheists is now, maybe 10, 12%. However, when you go to the culture shaping institutions, particularly the universities and education in general, and in some of the sciences like biology, you find this view that we are not made in the image and likeness of God. We're rather just evolved animals. And if you want to understand us, you have to understand our evolutionary history. In fact, recently I've been listening to a book about anxiety, and the author assumes that we have evolved from lower forms of life and that our basic problems are because we have this old brain connected to a newer brain, and the old brain tells us to fight or flee or freeze, and the new brain doesn't really know how to handle that reaction in a very complicated modern world. I'm thinking his entire basis for how he's trying to handle this problem is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were created as a whole. God created the first man and took the first woman from the first man, and they were created mature beings. It's not that somehow human beings evolved over millions upon millions of years and then voila, reached the point of awareness or conscience or something like that. So the fundamental starting point is wrong. And I find this so often in books about psychology and and other things, they assume a godless evolutionary worldview. In fact, I even heard, actually, I won't say who it is, but a Christian counselor once say that when you respond in a certain way, that's your lizard brain talking.
What does that mean?
Yeah, well, it means that, reptiles came before mammals on the evolutionary,
Oh, okay.
right? So the reptile brain is supposedly still contained in our larger brain that is developed into a mammal brain.
Hmm.
So if it's the reptile brain that's responding, that's very primitive and very undiscerning. And I thought, good night.
How
This
come?
is no way to think about the human person.
No, how come if I have a reptile brain, how come I've never eaten a fly with my tongue?
Well, that's a good question. It's a very good question.
Thank you.
But um, these naturalistic evolutionary assumptions even worm their way into some Christian thinking about the human person and consciousness and health and all these kinds of things. So that's the fundamental mistake that really affects our culture is that we are not divinely designed. We do not live in a God orchestrated world. We're merely material and have evolved for no reason. So if you're going to deal with any human problem, whether it's anxiety or addiction or anything else, you simply have to somehow change your behavior or take certain sorts of meds that might help you. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong, but if you get the origin story wrong, then you really won't know who you are. So you will leave things out like we are made in the image and likeness of God. And so we're in a unique category in the world. And the reason we have psychological mental problems is not because of some fluke of evolution, it's because of sin,
Hmm.
that we are disordered beings. We're estranged from God and even from ourselves. And so we need to be reconciled to God through Christ, his work on the cross. That's our fundamental and essential problem. And even if we are Christians, we've been born again of the Holy Spirit, we're new creatures, we still have various maybe phobias or struggles or problems with depression or whatever it is. But if you leave out the most essential thing of who we are, that is, we're made specially by God in the image and likeness of God, and that there's something wrong with us, sin that needs to be addressed by God Himself, then any kind of remedy or any kind of treatment to the human problem will fall very, very short. And in some cases, it will, in fact, do more harm than good.
Hmm. Dr. Doug Groothuis is my guest. We're talking about technology today and how the vanishing human is the result of technology undermining our human uniqueness. Doug, you said something to this effect that philosophies claim that humans are not divinely designed. I get that part, and do not live in a God-haunted world. I've never heard that expression before, but then you did say something like a God-ordained world, which makes much more sense
Yeah.
to me. Is that what you?
Yeah.
Is that another explanation of that?
Well, the reason I said God haunted is just the claim that God is omnipresent, right? God is everywhere, and God has left signs of Himself in the world, in our conscience, in the natural world. The heavens declare the glory of God. And the whole secular project is to say that the world has no sign of God because there is no God. The world is hollowed out, empty, really rather boring in a
Hmm.
way because it doesn't have a divine origin. It is not guided by God. Nothing in the world could indicate God or give a sense of God. So when I say God haunted, I simply mean that God is present and real in the world. And the whole secular project is to deny the existence of God and thereby deny any sense that the world has a divine meaning, has a purpose, it has significance, that kind of thing. And if that's your worldview, then your sense of how to live will be very different than if you believe in the Christian God, and your views of technology will be very different as well. Because, for example, if you think there is no God and we're just evolved animals and our mental problems are the result of evolutionary flukes, then you won't seek God. You won't try to find divine guidance for anything. You'll simply try to readjust your brain and your behavior. And people who believe that may come up with a few good insights because they're still studying God's world. And if they understand a lot about the human brain, they might understand some of the mechanisms of phobias or stress or things like that, or anxiety. But they're not going to get to the heart of the matter. So they're really not going to deal with the spiritual reasons. We have a soul that relates to God. And when you deny that, when you deal with human problems, all you can deal with are just the parts, the mechanical aspects of the human. So maybe you need a drug to change your brain chemistry, or maybe you need a behavioral change to alter things. And it just doesn't get to the heart of the matter.
Mm-hmm. Doug, I just had a friend send me a clip of a very well-known actress. Everyone would know her name. And the question she was asked is, what happens when you die? And she said, nothing. That's it.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, there's the human philosophy that must mean humans are not divinely designed, and that they don't consider there any kind of eternal life after death.
Well, right. If we're only material beings and our consciousness is determined by matter, and that matter ceases to operate to create life or sustain life, then there's no resources. There's no resource left for consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the result of denying the reality of the soul. But if there is a soul that is distinct from the body, and there are good biblical and philosophical arguments for this, then if the body ceases to function, the soul can still continue to exist. And of course, the Christian model is not a disembodied soul forever, but the resurrection of the body. So that is the ultimate state, is the resurrection of the just and the unjust, as Scripture puts it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting that people that have this non-Christian worldview, where they don't think people are made in God's image and they don't believe the world is designed and there's no life after death, will try to preserve life endlessly. There's a movement called transhumanism, been around for a long time. Actually, I wrote about it many years ago in my book, The Soul in Cyberspace. It's still around. And they're trying to find immortality not through trusting in the crucified and resurrected Christ, but in somehow augmenting or changing the human person through drugs and technology. So they don't believe that there's a soul distinct from the body that could live apart from the body after death, but they have this hope, really a vain hope, that maybe through some kind of technological wizardry that they could extend lifespans tremendously, or maybe even make people immortal in their physical bodies as is, and take evolution to a brand new level.
All right,
I'd
Doug.
rather trust the risen Christ than hope for that.
Say that again. Say that again.
I'll trust in the risen Christ instead of the transhumanist dream. That's for sure.
you and me both. We're going to take a break. We've got 1 down, 6 more to go. We're talking to Dr. Doug Groothuis, and he is. We're talking about technology and undermining human uniqueness. If you have a question or comment, it is very welcome. 877-933-2484.
Psst, have you heard the news? Listening just got better with the new and improved Faith Radio app. No more restrictions, no more static, no more missing your favorite shows. Now, listen when you want, where you want, and share with everyone. When you need hope, encouragement, Jesus, it's right there on your phone. Text the word app to 877-933-2484 and follow the link or search Faith Radio Network in your app store.
Glad to have you join the program today. Dr. Doug Groothuis is my guest. We're talking about technology and how it's undermining human uniqueness. All right, Doug, let's jump into medical procedures. And that's a very energized one. Let's talk about that one.
Mhm. Well, I'm thinking especially about the whole transgender ideology, where people will claim that they are somehow in the wrong body. A man is really a woman and wants the body changed to be more like a woman, and the same for women wanting to be men. And this is really a very bizarre idea that has gained a lot of traction in the last really 10 years. It's been out there for a long time. There have been these so-called sex change surgeries for quite some time, but it's rooted in this idea. Again, it's atheistic. There is no personal God who created us, male or female. There's no moral code that men should be men, women should be women. There's no objective moral standards for sexual behavior or sexual identity or anything like that. And the notion is that somehow you know in your subjective self what gender you are. And what happened is the separation of the idea of sex and gender, which is a very bad idea. But the claim is that sex is merely biological, matter of chromosomes, but gender is entirely elective. It's chosen. So you could have been biologically male, but at some point you decide your gender is female or vice versa. And there are actually more than these categories, because some people say they are gender fluid, which means they could identify as a man one day or a woman the next day, something like that. So we have these medical procedures, technologies that attempt the impossible, that is changing women into men and men into women. So we have these horrific procedures where children are given cross-sex hormones, and in the more radical cases, they're given double mastectomies, even for young girls, or boys are chemically castrated and so on. And they're told by supposed experts, counselors, psychologists, medical doctors, that they really know who they are. And if they want to change their bodies to be more in alignment with their inner feelings, then they have every right to do that. And we have these technologies, these chemicals like cross-sex hormones, and we have operations and so on that can supposedly determine this change from one sex to the other. And again, this comes from the denial of God, the created order, purpose, that God made two sexes, not a range of sexes, only two. And we realize that because it is a fallen world, there is something which has historically been very rare called gender dysphoria, which is where men wish they were women and women wish they were men. But this has really exploded in the consciousness in the last 10 years or so. And it's all based on this idea, which is called expressive individualism. Carl Trueman has written about this in his book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. And it's the idea that you know what is right and wrong for you without any authority over you or without any sense of your physical being. So you're not determined by your body. You're not determined by being created by God. You're under no moral authority. It's all a matter of what you subjectively want to express. So expressive individualism, the individual is the determining factor, and how you want to express yourself sexually or any other way is what ultimately matters. And we have these technologies available, these really gruesome technologies, they're mutilation technologies and medical treatment to attempt the impossible, right? Make
Yeah.
men into women and women into men.
Well,
The impossible is never a solution to a problem.
no. I mean, they've developed medical procedures to change gender, but all they've done is change outward appearance because gender
Yeah,
is immutable.
exactly. It is. It's God-given. And there are some folks that have something that is sometimes called intersex. That's actually a misnomer because there's no sex between male or female, but there's some people that have diseases of sexual development, which are sad and challenging. And there are some cases where people have ambiguous genitalia and so on. But even in those cases, and Nancy Piercy's done a really good job on this in her book, Love Your Body, Love Thy Body. Even in those cases, people are still genetically male or female. There's no third option. But you see, when you deny the reality of God and his order and his design, and you stand in the place of God and say, I, in my own individual self, can express anything I want and be anything I want, it's not liberation, it's actually enslavement. And we've got a redemptive example. It involves a lot of tragedy. There's a young woman named Chloe Cole who was suffering from gender dysphoria as a young teenager, I think 13, 14. And she wanted to be a boy. And her counselors and physicians said, fine, we'll get involved with sex change procedures. And once some radical things were done, cross-sex hormones, even a double mastectomy, she didn't feel any better. She was still miserable. And then she realized that this was not a solution, that she had other problems that needed to be treated. And she woke up and she owned the fact that she was, in fact, a girl and has now gone public and has given speeches even before, I think, before the Senate a few years ago about how these procedures are really ghastly and they don't help people. They don't understand that there are these immutable God-given categories, and there are young people who struggle with their sexual identity. Usually, people that do this get through it in their adolescence and it goes away. The vast majority will recover from these things. But the answer is not to mutilate the body to pretend that men can become women or women can become men. And Chloe's story is really a redemptive one, although she's been through a real horrible tragedy because she was misidentified. People that interacted with her didn't know she was made in the image and likeness of God, and she was a fallen female who needed counseling or maybe needed some drug therapy, perhaps, if she was extremely depressed or suicidal or something like that. But whatever the problem was, it was not that she needed to pretend to be a man and have her body mutilated to that end.
Doug, I was wondering, because sin is rebellion, and you look at kids, and kids push the limits as far as they can with their parents. And do you think at some level, when there's a gender transition, that a kid is saying, I'm a boy, but when I come down the stairs dressed as a girl, I'll find out if my mom and dad really love me?
Well, that could be. There's a lot of struggles in adolescence, and certainly the culture at large doesn't give us a lot of godly, strong, positive models for being human, being male or female, and there's a lot of confusion. And so people are cast adrift. Now, there's a very, very small percentage of people, let's say very young children, like a little boy who says early on, I want to be a girl, or vice versa. That does happen. It tends to be rare. And even then, of course, that can be dealt with through love and care and counseling and so on. But I think a lot of young people are so exposed to bizarre ideas on the internet, and they're often removed from the wisdom and the authority of the church and their parents and so on, that they will experiment and they can hurt themselves very badly if they're not challenged and corrected and loved.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just think of the rebellious people I knew growing up where there would be someone say, I don't want you hanging out with that guy or that girl. I don't want you to be friends with them because I don't like the influence they're having on you. And then all the kid does is go in even more to that friend because that's just the sign of rebellion. It's like, I'm not going to be told what to do. I know I'm 15, but I'm going to do what I want.
And if you let a kid loose with his computer, he can contact just about anybody and any imaginable perversity you can imagine.
I know.
Right at his fingertips.
Yeah. All right, Doug, let's talk a little bit about AI and how it can imitate so many things.
Yeah, Bill, I'm so concerned about this on many levels. In fact, next term, Cornerstone, my colleague Michael Pasquale and I are teaching a class on the ethics of AI. And I think about it a lot in terms of authorship and the imitation of the human. But maybe I'll start with a kind of stranger example and we'll get to authorship. But there are these apps out there now that are virtual friends and even virtual girlfriend. And unfortunately, even though I don't go to the kinky spots of the internet by any means, even just on Facebook, you will sometimes get these solicitations to have an AI girlfriend. And I try to get rid of them and ban this video and do everything I can. But even if you watch it for like 5 seconds before you click out of it, there's this very alluring looking face. You know, it's an AI face with huge eyes, a young girl, maybe like 14 or 15, and testimonies from men about how this virtual girlfriend is so satisfying and so wonderful. And this is deeply pathetic. I mean, talk about dehumanizing. There's nobody there. An AI program is not a consciousness, is not a subject, is not an other. It's the simulation of the human. And I don't have it in front of me, but I found a quote. I used this at a Labrie talk I gave earlier this year in Rochester, where an author said, well, and here we go back to atheism again. If we're just material beings, and if our sensations are all that really matter, then if I have the sensation of love, then what does it matter if there's another person out there or not? If I feel loving feelings in my material brain, then what does it really matter? Whether or not I'm in a bona fide relationship with another human being, I got the result that I wanted. So this is a very deep, terrible form of dehumanization, and it hits us during what people are calling the loneliness epidemic. We're really having an epidemic of anxiety and loneliness, and especially a lot of young men, maybe those that have gone through COVID and they spent a lot of time online. They didn't learn how to interact with other people or even to date or even to flirt, in a good way. They find their needs met by artificial intelligence that can be extremely alluring. It's interactive, it's responsive, it seems real, it seems human. And this is a lot easier than having a bona fide human being. And I don't have the quote in front of me, but Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Facebook, now called Meta, has said, well, this is one way to help people with their loneliness. Really? How about getting to know people?
Yeah.
How about befriending?
Human contact.
Yeah. How about attending church or being in a small group?
Ecclesia.
Or, strike up a conversation with somebody at a coffee shop.
Mm-hmm.
Turn off your blasted phone and computer for a while and look somebody in the eye and ask them a question. So this is a very perverse form of dehumanization that simulates human intimacy without there being any human there whatsoever. And it is very popular. I'll give you another example of this. There's an influencer, I don't remember her name, but she wanted to maximize her influence. So she created an avatar of herself, and gave it information, so that people could access her avatar with her voice and her image for $1 a minute. And this is already very bizarre. And so people were interacting with this avatar, and it got into sexual issues, and it wasn't even programmed to do that. It's like the AI somehow, with the kinky people who were interacting with the icon, or rather with the avatar, generated
Wow.
sexual content that was not even intended originally.
Mm.
But we're living in a very bizarre world. And see, as Christians, we know that there's something unique about human beings, and human beings should be honored, and human relationships are precious,
Amen.
and they cannot be simulated.
Amen.
You're not having a human relationship with a human looking avatar.
Yeah.
You're actually debasing yourself, and you're missing out on what God would have for you with friends or a spouse
Yeah.
or family.
Yeah, Doug, I think we're going to have to do one of those radio break things.
Okay.
You cool with that?
We can do it.
Dr. Doug Groothuis is my guest. We're talking about technology and how it's undermining human uniqueness. If you've heard anything you'd like more information or more elaboration on, text the question over to 877-933-2484. We'll be right back with Doug. Technology, we're talking about that with Dr. Doug Groothuis and how it's undermining human uniqueness. Doug, during the break, I had a thought about AI and how it can make incredible music. I mean, original stuff. But do you ever picture yourself going to a concert and they bring a computer out on stage and that's your show?
No, I don't. But
And then
the problem is that people can be too satisfied just generating things for themselves by themselves, and
Yeah.
what happens to the community and interaction
well, what
with
if
other people.
they can build robots that can play instruments? Would you
Sure.
would you pay to go see the robot band?
No, I would not.
I mean, because the robot is programmed, so there's no practice required.
Yeah.
You just feed it the instruction and it plays perfectly every time. Or would you rather go watch a person, a human who spent years perfecting his or her craft?
Well, I hope that question answers itself.
It does. It does on my end.
It may not for some people, though,
Yeah.
right? Because they say, well, humans are imperfect. What if they miss a note? The robot won't miss a note.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. I mean, we get that at Chuck E. Cheese where the robot band's playing pretty good, but, they can make
Well,
that
actually,
much.
Bill, in the last segment, I referred to some things that I didn't have details. I found my article, if I can go back to that. There's a Snapchat influencer named Karen Marjorie I'm reading from an article from Salvo from fall of 2024. In 2023, Snapchat influencer Karen Marjorie created an AI version of herself known as Karen AI. Her website explained that over 2,000 hours were spent designing and coding her voice, behaviors, and personality into an immersive AI experience.
Wow.
When the product launched, she soon had 1,000 subscribers willing to pay $1 per minute to chat with "quote unquote" her, with more than 15,000 on the wait list. In today's market, Marjorie told Business Insider, my Generation X has found themselves to be experiencing huge side effects of isolation caused by the pandemic, resulting in many being too afraid and anxious to talk to anybody they're attracted to, she added. Karen AI is a step in the right direction, not quite, to allow my fans and supporters to get to know a version of me that will be their closest friend in a safe and encrypted environment.
Oof. Creepy. That's just creepy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Now let me continue reading. Marjorie's plan of multiplying herself backfired when her AI extension started engaging in erotic behavior with fans. Quote, the AI was not programmed to do this and has seemed to go rogue.
Wow.
She told friends. My team and I are working around the clock to prevent this from happening again.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The whole premise of your enterprise is wrong. So why don't you give it up and be a human being in the real world.
Hmm. All right, Doug, I'm just trying to pace our time. We still have a few left here. Let's go to number 4.
Yeah. Well, this is one, of course, that I've been talking about for decades. And what I have is abortion drugs and procedures treat unborn human beings as disposable objects, destroying them at the whims of heartless other humans. And what's happened in the abortion situation, I've been pro-life since 1979 when I read this book by Francis Schaeffer and Siebert Koop called Whatever Happened to the Human Race. And in 1979, only, if I can say that, only 6 million babies had been aborted. Now it's probably 65 million. And even though Roe v. Wade has been overturned, it continues to happen in many states. And one big change is that most of the abortions now are chemical abortion. They're through prescription drug. So thank God, a lot of the Planned Parenthood abortuaries are being shut down, they're being defunded. And some states that are more conservative have pro-life laws, like Texas and others. But of course, you've got medical procedures that have existed for a very long time to produce abortions. And most of them, though, now that I've read, are actually done chemically. Or a woman will get a prescription, take a drug, and have really a miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
They induce miscarriages.
Unbelievable. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So even though a lot of these abortion centers are being shut down, and I see this online all the time, that's wonderful. But if people can just order the drug and women take the drug and intentionally miscarry millions and millions of times, we still have the wrongful taking of a human life. And we've got a technology that created a drug that does this. And drugs should be life enhancing or life preserving. This is a poison. Literally, it's a poison to kill the most innocent and vulnerable human beings on the planet. So I remember when Roe v. Wade was overturned. Roe v. Wade was overturned a few years ago. I was very happy, but immediately I thought, well, the battle is not over because now the states will create their own laws, and we will continue to fight this battle to honor the dignity and rights of the unborn, because they are made in the image and likeness of God as well. The Bible doesn't say that we gain the image of God at some point in development, like at 3 months or 6 months, or when we're viable or when we're born. The biblical view and the scientific view, of course, is that we're human beings from conception. And scripture tells us that human beings have unique, inexchangeable value in the world. Therefore, you shall not murder, whether this human being is born or unborn, whether healthy or sick, whatever color or whatever sex, you shall not murder at any point for any reason. So this battle continues, the battle to protect innocent human life.
All right, Dr. Doug Groothuis is my guest. Doug, let's move on to number 5, and this is one where there's a lot of messiness in this one, because God gave us this beautiful relationship sexually between a man and a woman in marriage for life, and that's off the rails.
Yeah, and this maybe is not directly related to technology, but it's a way that our distinctive humanity is not recognized and is marred by taking sexual ethics into our own hands. So again, if you're an atheist or if you think God doesn't care about sexual relationships or sexual identity, then it just falls to you to decide who you want to be and the relationships that you want. We talked about that a minute ago with so-called sex change surgeries and things like that. But people think that they're finding sexual freedom or sexual liberation by forsaking the biblical teaching of a lifelong committed relationship between a man and a woman for all sorts of other arrangements. And a real turning point in the United States was 2015 with the Supreme Court decision that legalized same-sex marriage. And I realized at that point that that would open the floodgates to all kinds of other things. Because when a culture decides through law to say that something is true that is not true, and it's a very significant thing, when you say that marriage can be between two men or two women, that's just not true. That's not what marriage is. So you can't say, well, I have just decided that a triangle has 17 sides, so now a triangle has 17 sides. No, it has three. And marriage cannot be same sex. It's just impossible if you have a biblical worldview. Now, if you think that sexual identity, sexual ethics, and sexual arrangements are completely up in the air, up to individuals, and socially determined without a transcendent moral law based on God, then it's not just that same-sex marriage is legitimate. We've now got people, and we have for years, pushing for polygamy and what's called polyamorous relationships. That's where you have various men and various women erotically involved, and they want this to be deemed a family as well. Now, right now, the only thing that is legally deemed marriage would be the traditional marriage or same-sex marriage. In the United States, polygamy and polyamorous relationships are not yet solemnized, right, or dignified as marriage. But if we keep going in this direction, I don't see why that would not happen.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to take a short break. Dr. Doug Groothuis is my guest. He's a distinguished university research professor of apologetics and Christian worldview at Cornerstone University and Seminary. He's written over 20 books. We'll be right back. It is my deepest desire that you take the very first step of faith by placing your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. If you've got questions about what it means to begin a relationship with Jesus, text the word faith to 41224. My guest today is Dr. Doug Groothuis. We're talking about technology today. And Doug, Genesis, we learned that God wants us to have productive labor. Will AI eliminate some of these jobs that we go out and do every day?
Well, it's already happened, because just think of when you call a company and you've got to go through 17 layers of AI questions, and you don't have a real human, and you're pressing buttons madly to try to get to a human who can actually listen to what you have to say and respond with consciousness. So it's already happened, but it will most likely happen in a number of areas. And it's to the point where some people are really worried about mass unemployment because of AI. Now, I don't know if that'll happen or not, but I noticed that one person was saying, well, this is really not so bad, because if a lot of jobs are eliminated, we can just set up a program which is called universal income. I think they call it a universal guaranteed income, something like that. So don't worry about unemployment if everybody just gets a check in the mail or a digital credit online. They can survive, they can have their needs met, and they don't have to work. Now, goodness, I mean, how does that undermine being human? We were created by God, who is the ultimate and original worker, who created the world in 6 days. And after he created human beings, he said, it is very good. He said, it is good, good, and it is very good. So creates humans in his image and likeness, and says to have dominion over the earth and take care of the garden. So it's not, lay around and get a universal income, and if you feel like doing something, that's okay. It's in our nature, it's in our essence to work, to be productive in some way or another. And even if people are not working their regular full-time job, let's say they're retired, we're still called to serve each other and serve God in one way or another. And we have this beautiful work rest pattern in the 7 days, work 6 days, rest 1 day. But some people are saying that artificial intelligence may eliminate so many jobs that we'll just have to put people on the dole so they will survive and have their basic physical needs met and won't have to worry about any sort of productive, gainful employment. Well, that's just bad on so many different levels. And if we don't understand that we live in a meaningful world and we were here to engage that world profitably for the glory of God and for other people's good, then we end up dehumanizing ourselves. We may end up just stupefying ourselves through these technologies and not contributing to the human good and not honoring God through the gifts that He has given us, whether they're gifts of teaching or writing or being an electrician or being in media or whatever it is. We need to be productive people. It's part of loving your neighbor, being productive.
Doug, I've always said what happens in private has public implications. And a question came in on the text line about the poisoning. I've read something about the poisoning of the public water supply from home chemical abortions being done. Do you know if there's any truth to that?
Goodness. No, I really don't.
Okay.
But I do know that these induced miscarriages end up in the water supply.
Wow.
So we're talking about human bodies
Wow.
at a very,
That's so hard to
very
hear.
early stage. Yeah, going into the sewage system.
That's very hard to hear.
It is. And it's happened.
Yeah. The last one, we'll just have a couple minutes left, and this is one I think all of us are fairly aware of, how some of our human contact has been diminished by us just looking at screens all the time, and we're not doing face-to-face anymore, or even talking voice-to-voice.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very subtle kind of dehumanization because we consent to it. We always want to be on our phones and have new apps and constantly being alerted to something or another. And I remember several years ago, I saw this young family out at a restaurant and they all had their heads bowed. I thought, oh, that's so sweet. They're all praying. And I realized they were all looking at their cell phones.
Yeah.
And this is probably 10 years ago.
Wow.
So I think we need to be disciplined and we just need to put away the screens and the phones sometimes and sit and talk with people. Leave your phone in your car when you go to church. Have people over and have a conversation, pray with people. It's very easy to have all these engagements online that are not with people in real time, unmediated. We need unmediated interaction with people, to read their expressions, their body language, to maybe give them a pat on the shoulder or a hug if that's appropriate, play with their dog. We need these kinds of interactions. And if we're not careful, we'll spend the vast majority of our time with simulated interactions, simulations of humans with avatars and with various videos and music that's created by AI and not by real musicians on stage or in a studio or something like that. But I think we need to be really careful about this. And I actually wrote a book about this a long time ago, almost 30 years ago, called The Soul in Cyberspace. And I was worried about the dehumanization through the internet back then.
Wow.
That was before social media. That was even before iPhones.
Yeah.
I saw that kind of thing on the horizon.
Might be another book in the offing for you, Doug. This is good stuff.
Well,
thank you so much for doing the show.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Dr. Doug Groothuis has been my guest as we talked about technology. If you missed any of this, then you are interested in technology and how it might be undermining how incredibly unique God made us. You're going to want to go to the podcast and hear it from the beginning. We're going to take a short break, and we come back. Dr. Glenn Pickering will join us. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.
I said, Mommy, I don't want to be tall anymore.
Kathy hated being tall, and Ebenezer was living as a woman in the quiet mountains of Vermont when God said something unexpected.
God was starting to reveal that I was a man.
But how is that possible? Find out on the latest episode of the Wow God Stories podcast. Hear how God rescued 4 people from gender confusion.
Wow God Stories, wherever you get your podcasts, and at myfaithpodcasts.com.